Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another New Jersey Constitutional Republicans virtual conversation. It's my great honor this morning to have Republican gubernatorial candidate Jack Ciattarelli here with us this morning. Jack, how are you doing?
JR, I'm doing great. Thanks again for the opportunity to be with you and all those that follow you.
Well, I appreciate you having joining us again today. I know you have a busy schedule with the primary coming up. A couple of things I wanted to discuss to begin with was your debate the other evening. And well, there's a lot of things, Jack, that I thought I knew about you, but I never knew that you were left wing. Now, how's that possible?
Well, the one thing that there's two things that my opponent excels at, JR, losing elections and lying. And as I like to say, liars lie and social media is their playground. But listen, we're Republicans for a number of reasons, one of which is we've always believed in the ideals of self-reliance and personal responsibility. Those are two things that my opponent seems to struggle with most.
Yeah, there's no question about it. Now, Jack, you know, we could call you a rock star easily, but now you have another rock star in the household, and that's your wife. And she comes out swinging. She reminded me a little bit about Billy Martin years ago. Remember Billy Martin, the manager of the Yankees? So, and I thought it was very unfortunate, very unprofessional of the Singh camp to talk to your wife in the way that they did. And I think that's gotten a lot of publicity throughout the state.
Well, you know the old saying, JR, you mess with the Cubs, watch out for Mama Bear. So they set up a camera. They tried to ambush her, and when they went after the kids, she went after them, and they got what they had coming to them. Very, very proud of Melinda. I really am, and not that I'm one bit surprised about her standing up for her husband and her kids. But what took place and the fact that there's been radio silence from Hersh Singh and his campaign manager since. You know, what's interesting about all this is they ambushed her, they videoed it. They're the ones that put it on the web, and the thing has completely backfired on them. And Melinda's now on my short list for lieutenant governor.
As she should be. And the thing that I thought was amazing in bringing in the kids, which is something we don't do, we never do in political confrontations or contests. And the fact is, they don't even understand that your oldest son is an officer in the United States Army, and he's about to be deployed, and he's a wonderful young man. And I know that your other son and daughter are as well. And it's just amazing what little the Singh camp knows to begin with about you and your family.
Well, listen, they were agitated by the fact that I continue to point out that Hersh Singh tries to advertise himself as a businessman. He's never created a job, an entrepreneur. He's never owned a company. And at 38 still lives at home with his parents. And so this guy decided to go after my wife about our four kids, 26, 24, 23, and 21, living at home. Mm-hmm. My 26-year-old daughter hasn't lived at home since she graduated from college 4 years ago. And as you know, my son Jake is a first lieutenant in the U.S. Army, 10th Mountain Division, and just got his deployment orders for this coming fall. And by law, when you're in the military service, your last permanent residence is still your residence. That doesn't mean he lives here, but that's the way it goes. Our 23-year-old is just out of technical school and is a licensed diesel mechanic. He lives at home. Our 21-year-old doesn't live at home 9 months out of the year. He's a college student. So again, you go after the kids, watch out for Mr., but in particular, Mrs. Ciattarelli.
That's right. I think everybody knows that now in the state, Jack. But tying into the fact that the Singhs, Hersh Singh's parents, and of course he's involved in too with the government contracts that you identified as worth $35 million a year. So these people have made money off of the government. And if you're doing that and you want to be a representative and you've made your living that way, how can you possibly identify with the middle class, with the hardworking blue collar Americans or New Jersey citizens? How can you identify with their issues, and how could you be a proper representative of them if you've only made money off of the government your entire career?
Well, JR, Hersh Singh is one of those people that woke up in life on third base and thinks he hit a triple. And so, listen, I'm a self-starter. I've started two businesses. I've created jobs. and I stimulated the New Jersey economy with my capital investments in those two companies. I put it all on the line, my life savings, and we've been very fortunate. We've worked our butts off, and I'm proud of our accomplishments here in New Jersey, employing my fellow New Jerseyans. But if he wants to talk about the swamp, I mean, my goodness. So yes, the family business does business with the federal government and secured over $35 million in contracts from the Obama administration.
Right. And this is in stark contrast to your entrepreneurship and the businesses that you've created, the jobs that you've created, managing budgets, all of these attributes, which are so important to serving as governor of the state. He has zero experience in all of those endeavors.
Well, two things, JR. Number one, I never got a penny from the state of New Jersey or the federal government to help me with my businesses, a penny. And but then again, when I sold the businesses, you know what both governments did to me. They hit me up pretty good, and I want to change that, New Jersey, by making the gain on the sale of a family-owned business tax-free. But that's one of the other things I point out about Her Singh. I just don't see any life experiences that he can draw from that make him qualified and grants the wisdom one needs to be the CEO of the state of New Jersey and responsible for 9 million citizens. If you take a look at the resume, what you see is something pretty thin.
Right. And one of the more egregious remarks that he made, Jack, was he said that you're not knowledgeable of different ethical groups. You'll say anything to get elected, and even went so far to mention the word racism in your relationship with the Indian community, which is the furthest thing from the truth. You're certainly not a racist. Put that to bed.
Well, JR, my experience has always been, and I know you know this too, when the other side starts calling you names, it usually means they're losing and losing real bad. So
Right.
again, liars lie, social media is the playground. I'm not into name calling. But at that point in the debate, he sounded an awful lot like a Democrat, JR. You know, when Republicans challenge the Democrats on certain issues, they begin to call us racist. Okay, that's the default, right? Of losing the argument, that you don't have a comeback, that you really don't have a compelling reason for why that's your policy position. We call Republicans racist. Her Singh did that the other night.
That's right. And the other thing that he does, dovetailing with that comment, Jack, is the fact that he's always talking about sectarian groups. He talks about minorities. He talks about young people. He talks about women. We believe in liberty for all. And then when we say all, we mean all human beings, the self-evident truth that all men are created equal. But he does sound like a Democrat, and that he's always talking about sectarianism and dividing people into groups as opposed to people being all equal.
A couple things come to mind there, JR. Number one, he was trying to make the case that he appeals to all those groups, and yet he's lost race after race after race after race, and he's been rejected by the people who know him best. Summers Point, Linwood, Atlantic County. He doesn't have the endorsement of those local Republicans. And so, listen, Her Singh and his campaign manager, who went after my wife, is the part of is what's wrong with the Republican Party. Let me put it that way. And listen, but these are what the elections can do, and we can expel him when we win on primary day.
I just want to touch on two constitutional aspects. Of course, that's what we like to specialize in here with the constitutional Republicans. But he said, quote, if he was given, quote, this is what he said, if he was given, quote, absolute control of all three bodies of government, it would be too close it'd be too close. And that if that was the case, that the Democrats essentially would come over and want to negotiate with us if he had absolute control of all three aspects of our divisions of government. And Article 3 of the Constitution, which I know he hasn't read, state constitution, says that all three branches are being given power, and they're to be given power distributed equally, not one branch lording over another. So this is a very simple concept he's not able to grasp.
JR, there were a number of very, very embarrassing things that came out of his mouth the other night, and that was just one of them. And at that point, I think if you remember, I referred to him. We already got a king that we're trying to get rid of. We're not into kingdoms. We don't need another king. So listen, that type of attitude is dead on arrival. It's bad for the Republican Party. Yes, are we fighting for something we haven't had for nearly 30 years in New Jersey? I am a Republican governor and a Republican majority because I believe in a common sense conservative approach is what's needed to solve our problems here. And Phil Murphy's only making things worse. We're dying a death by 1,000 cuts here in New Jersey, and 990 have already been administered. JR, if I got to hear from one more person that's bought a house in North Carolina for $300,000 less than they spent in New Jersey, that's got 5 bedrooms and only pays $3,000 in property taxes, I'm going to scream. I mean, that's what we need to change here in New Jersey. And that's what my candidacy is all about.
And the other thing, Jack, that your opponent mentioned, that the first day he would get elected, he would sign an executive order allowing everybody to be able to carry weapons outside of their homes. This is preposterous. There are certain statutory regulations that exist. And even though we believe in the right to carry, as the Second Amendment says, the right to keep and bear arms, and to take those arms outside of your house for people who are law-abiding citizens who have clean gun records. Now, for him to say something is very disingenuous, and it misleads the people who he looks to represent by saying that he can just sign an executive order and do whatever he wants. He has no understanding of the statutory requirements in that instance.
It was another profoundly embarrassing statement that's bad for the Republican Party because of how wrong it is, the statement itself. We believe in the Second Amendment, and that's not the way to get back our Second Amendment rights here in New Jersey, which have been infringed upon. Okay, I believe in the Second Amendment, but that is not the way. That is not the way to get back our Second Amendment rights here in New Jersey. Again, profoundly embarrassing. But listen, in 10 days, we're going to move on without her sing.
And the other thing, Jack, is there's been a lot of misrepresentation out there about you and medical freedom. So please clear up any kind of discrepancies or misunderstandings we may have on medical freedom.
This is the great challenge, JR, in the social media age where liars lie and social media is their playground. And we all know there's a ton of misinformation out there. And sadly, a great many people believe what they read on a social media post. And so I have been very clear on this issue from the very, very start. Okay. I am not for mandating vaccines. I will never sign a bill that mandates vaccines. I don't think government has any right to demand that any individual have to ingest a medicine. I believe in vaccine choice. I believe in body autonomy. And I do not believe in vaccine passports. And as governor, will reject them at every turn. It's an invasion of privacy. It's discriminatory and an invasion of people's privacy.
Right now, I want to, one more remark before we go on the Ciattarelli offensive, if you will. We're going to talk about you and all the great things you're doing. But the one thing that I noticed as I analyzed the debate and the instances and the experiences that I've had with Hirsch Singh is the fact that he talks at people, whereas you talk to people. And I think there's a great difference in that. Hirsch Singh is not the type of person that looks for advice or looks for counsel or looks for any kind of input or feedback from anyone. He really genuinely believes that he knows it all, but he genuinely has this attitude, this almost arrogant attitude to where he's talking at you as opposed to you.
JR, our favorite political figure and the person you and I both worship on the political side of the aisle, and our greatest president, who was our first Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, assembled a team of rivals because it was a very, very challenging time. And Lincoln never talked at people. He talked with people, but more importantly, Abraham Lincoln listened. That's why he assembled the team of rivals. Now, that is not to ever say that the tail wagged the dog. Abraham Lincoln was the dog that wagged the tail. And at the end, he formulated his own opinion and put forth his own decisions, but not before listening. Egomaniacs talk at people and they don't listen. And that is a very dangerous kind of leadership.
There's no question about that. And then the other thing very quickly, Jack, is I think Hirsch Singh needs to read up on Ronald Reagan a little bit. And the fact that he was the man who brought down the communist Soviet Union empire without firing a shot. but by talking about the SDI program and the Great Peace Through Strength initiative that he started. So when we're talking of comparing presidents with the who's better than who's the best president, of course, Abraham Lincoln, we believe, is the greatest president of all. But in our lifetimes, I think Ronald Reagan is clearly the better president that we've ever had in our lifetime.
New Jerseyans agree with you, JR. In poll after poll, Ronald Reagan polls as the most popular president amongst New Jerseyans. You know, the thing about Reagan was that there was sincerity, there was humility, but there was authenticity, right? And so the thing about Reagan was that even when you weren't agreeing with his position, you didn't hate him. You didn't even dislike him.
Yeah.
And
That's right.
Those things come into play here. And of course, we know
No
humility,
question.
something that Lincoln certainly possessed, is certainly not a quality that is part of Hirsch Singh's makeup.
And Jack, I'm going to give you heaps and praise on you now because like Lincoln and like Reagan, you have the ability to build coalitions. You can work, you can talk to the Democrats, you can try to bring us together on common sense legislation. And this is a great attribute that you have that clearly separates you from your opponents, is your ability to be a statesman, to be diplomatic, to use prudence, to use moderation, and to use your ability to build coalitions.
JR, I think what made me very, very successful in business, I employed 30 people, Jew and Gentile, black and white, male, female, all denominations. When it came time to solve our clients' problems, we all came together because that's what we were supposed to do. And we got it done. And I like to think that my leadership had a lot to do with that. And we were very successful. In politics, I've always taken that approach. Now, listen, I'm one competitive SOB. I'm playing to win. And so between now and election day, we've got a competition and we're playing to win. But the day after election day, we come together and it's time to govern. And I think that's why I've always had the respect of people on both sides of the aisle. I think it's also the reason why the 7 times I've won election in this state, twice at the municipal level, twice at the county level, and 3 2-year terms in the legislative level, it's all been in races where Democrats outnumber Republicans. It's not because I'm not conservative. It's because I talk about the things that we all agree on. Everybody, JR, everybody, and Lincoln understood this, as did Reagan. Everybody wants opportunity. Everybody wants security. And no country in the world provides that better than America if you work hard. You got to work hard. You got to hold up your end of the bargain. And so it bothers me greatly, JR, that we seem to be in a time and era that we don't celebrate the virtue of hard work. We demonize the successful amongst us. Lincoln once said, let a man go and build a big house and let those see that house and let them want to also achieve the same success and build their house, right? That's the human nature that you often refer to in our divine species known as human beings, right?
Yeah.
And it's what make our capitalist society and system work well. That's always been what I've been all about.
That's right. It's a great quote, Jack. And speaking of hard work, we know how a hard worker Lincoln was, manual labor, the great rail splitter. But you have worked as hard, if not harder, in going about the state, meeting with every single county Republican organization, all of the Republican groups throughout the state, and you've provided your very own wherewithal in supporting these organizations by writing out checks for them and supporting them. And this is why you were undefeated in the convention process, and you take into consideration the people, the committee people, the Republican committee people who stuff envelopes, make the phone calls, got the yard signs. And incidentally, right before we went on the air, I got my Jack Ciattarelli yard sign delivered. I don't know who did it, but I'm glad I got it and it's out front. But talk about the importance of working with all these organizations, meeting with these people, and then also supporting the down ballot, the Assembly and the Senate candidates that you need to be there to help you govern and restore a constitutional Republican government back in Trenton.
When I win the primary, JR, I'm the titular head of the Republican Party in New Jersey. And that means I have a responsibility to every single person on the ballot, no matter what level of government. I don't care if it's a mayor, a council person, a township committeeman. I don't care if it's a board of education spot. Okay. My job is to support Republicans because we believe in our common sense conservative approach to solving New Jersey's problems. We love this state, but we realize it's broken. But I've never been hesitant to write the check. I've never been hesitant to knock on doors with people. I sit down at the phone banks. I make the phone calls. That was one of the things I put to Mr. Singh the other night. You've never done anything to help any other Republican in this state get elected. Let's not kid ourselves. This isn't about New Jersey when it comes to you. It's not about the Republican Party when it comes to you. It's all about you. It's all about you. And that's the last thing we need right here in New Jersey, particularly as the minority party. So I'm excited this year because it's not just their governorship that New Jerseyans are voting on. It's all 120 seats in the state legislature. Let's compete in all 40 districts. Let's get the word out that Phil Murphy is ruining New Jersey, that his progressive agenda is an extremist agenda. And we could talk about a number of ways how it is extreme. It's wrong for New Jersey. It's wrong for New Jersey. We need to get us on a different path, and we can with a victory in November.
That's right. And you have come out unfavorably in denouncing the Reproductive Freedom Act, which is, of course, a play on words, which we did a interview last night with Dr. Kathleen Ruddy, who proposed that there's more motivation behind this bill than what meets the eye. And I suggest our viewers and our members look at that video. It's very interesting, Jack, but you have come out against this unjust legislation.
JR, it just shows you how extreme Phil Murphy is. Now, Donald Trump gets Amy Barrett on the Supreme Court, and then he prompts a couple of Democratic legislators to sponsor a bill, and then they call it the Reproductive Freedom Act. This is the abortion bill. This bill would allow abortions in months 7, 8, and 9 as performed by somebody other than an MD, which would put the female's well-being at stake. I need to tell you, JR, I've had pro-choice women across this state come up to me and say, I don't believe in that. I don't believe in that. Right. That's extremism. Right. It's extremism. Yeah. And we'll fight it. Well, now, what's interesting, JR, is that Steve Sweeney, the Senate president, and Craig Coughlin, the Assembly Speaker, who heads up the Assembly and the Democratic caucus, refused to post the bill. And you and I both know why.
Yes. Well, there's no question. And of course, Dr. Ruddy makes an excellent argument behind the motivation for this. And it's very, very, it fringes on bioethics, which is another subject that we'll talk about in the future. But Jack, I want to talk about the fact that after the history of this nation, through smallpox epidemics, through the War of 1812, First World War, World War II, Spanish flu pandemics, AIDS epidemics that we had in New York City, the Constitution was never suspended like it was in 2020, Jack, in the name of a health crisis. And the First Amendment rights of the right to assembly, the right of religious expression, and in New Jersey's Constitution, Jack, the right of the people to acquire, possess, and protect their property were all violated through executive orders and actions unconstitutionally by Phil Murphy and the Democrats. It's unfathomable, and I hope that you talk about this after the victory in the primary and talk about that very fact, the suspension of constitutional rights this summer.
He has hijacked our democracy, JR. He's kidnapped our democracy. And I know this sounds counterintuitive from a guy that's running for governor, but I will work with the legislature on a constitutional amendment that limits our governor being allowed to rule by executive order for prolonged periods of time. And if we've learned anything from this pandemic, it's that maybe our governor here in New Jersey is a bit too powerful. Okay. We don't believe in dictatorships. We don't believe in kingdoms. And he has ruled by fiat and executive order now for 15 months. 15 months. And the legislature has allowed this to happen. It's wrong. Let's take a look at our neighboring states. A Democratic legislature in New York is attempting to strip Mario Cuomo, a Democrat, of his executive powers. Let's look to the West in Pennsylvania. This was put to the people as a ballot referendum. They voted, a majority voted to strip the governor of these executive powers. I think it's quite obvious how a majority of people feel about this kind of power.
Well, Jack, this is why we talk about you restoring constitutional government within um, the state, and you're aware, you've read, you understand the Constitution. You served in the Assembly for 3 terms, so you understand the importance, and you understand that the Constitution is what protects the natural rights of the citizens. It's not the decisions that Phil Murphy makes, or even you would make, but the Constitution, and you're evaluated on your success as a governor on your ability to execute and defend and support the Constitution as it is written.
Correct, JR. And listen, the framers knew this, and that's why the document that they authored is timeless. Now, does government have a role? You bet it does in defending a nation, right? You need to have a militia, you need
Sure.
to have an army. We've got to defend a nation. You can't leave that up in the individual. But the intent
That's
of the
right.
framers in authoring that document was to empower individuals, right? We as Republicans
Mhm.
believe in the individual. Phil Murphy believes in an anti-state. We believe in empowering individuals with liberties. Phil Murphy believes in taking those liberties away. That's what's at the heart of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And it's timeless.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. This is a great segue. I want to read for you a portion of words by our beloved Abraham Lincoln, Jack. He said in 1858 at Lewistown, Illinois, he said, quote, "My countrymen, if you have been taught doctrines that conflict with the great landmarks of the Declaration of Independence, if you have listened to suggestions which would take away from its grandeur and mutilate the fair symmetry of its proportions, if you have been inclined to believe that all men are not created equal in those inalienable rights enumerated in our Charter of Liberty, let me entreat you to come back. Return to the fountain whose waters spring close by the blood of the Revolution. Think nothing of me. Take no thought for the political fate of any man whatsoever, but come back to the truths that are in the Declaration of Independence." Unquote.
JR, I love you because Lincoln is timeless. Those words, like all of his words, are as relevant today as they were in his own time. And listen,
Yes, they
you've heard
were.
me say this before. We all lose our way in life from time to time, in our personal life, our professional life, our political lives. When Lincoln would lose his way, he would go home and read the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, and it was his compass. It would always bring him right back to where he needed to be. And so, can't love Lincoln more, JR. He's
That's
a
right.
the greatest
Jack,
in our American history, and again, he's just timeless.
and I appreciate, Jack, your admiration for him and looking up to him, because really that's what the Republican Party needs to get back to in the state of New Jersey. And the principles of the Declaration, Jack, the idea that all men are created equal, that we have these unalienable rights, the laws of nature and nature's God, which I talk about, and then the consent of the government, the consent of those being governed, allowing the government to rule them as long as they're protecting their natural rights. These ideas, Jack, resonate with the greater number of people, with the majority of our population. And that's why I'm so thrilled about you and your candidacy and you becoming the governor, which we all need to work hard to make happen. And we really see a rebirth, a new birth of freedom in the state of New Jersey with your candidacy.
Not only a new birth of freedom, JR, but I also think a different style. Okay. Politics serves an important purpose in our lives. Its role with regard to who gets elected and how people govern. It's all about service. It's all about improving people's lives, right? By empowering them with liberties. But, even from a campaign standpoint, I mean, one of the secrets to my success in the 7 races I've won, where Democrats outnumbered Republicans each time, is I've always gone places Republicans typically don't go. And I talk about the ideals you and I are talking about right now. And what I usually find is when you do, people are nodding their heads in agreement. But what always motivated me to do that? You and I know this. After Lincoln won the election in November of 1860, on the way to the White House to be sworn in, he stops on a whistle stop tour that stopped in probably about 30 or 40 American cities, one of which was Trenton, New Jersey, where he addressed the legislature. Why is that significant? The reason that's significant is because in the election, not a single member of the New Jersey legislature voted for Abraham Lincoln. They all voted for his opponent. And yet, what did Lincoln do on his way to Washington, D.C. to be sworn in? He stopped in Trenton to meet with all these legislators who didn't vote for him.
That's right.
The man was
And
divine.
it showed,
Yep.
yeah, and it showed how the process has always been supposed to work. And this is why we have the Confederacy objected to the election of Abraham Lincoln. That's why they succeeded but yet the Democrats in New Jersey believed in this process, believed that they had to observe the will of the people and the election. And we've seen this year with the same sort of talk about not supporting, not my president, not this or that. We have to fulfill as citizens the government of the people, for the people, and by the people. We do that by observing elections, whether they go our way or not.
The current president is my son's commander in chief, JR. Okay. I think it's un-American to not want our president to be successful. And, it's funny, so many quotes that ring through our minds, JR, one of which was Lincoln's. When I think about that trip into Trenton, one of Lincoln's famous quotes is, and he in so doing warns us of our frailties as humans to sometimes prejudge. One of Lincoln's famous quote is, "I don't like the man, but I'm sure looking forward to getting to know him."
That is a great quote. Now, Jack, just a couple of more issues I'd like to talk about before we wrap it up. I know you got a busy schedule, but first of all, Jack, you're aware of a shooting that we had very, very close to us here in South Jersey in Fairfield Township, which is essentially where my family comes from. And the suspect has been incarcerated, has been captured. And what we talk about and what we think about with the Constitutional Republican movement is getting the onus off of the gun and getting it squarely on the back of the criminal. And as the law and order party, which is derived from the laws of nature, nature's God initially in the Declaration, we need to look at second time and repeat offenders and doing more to implement justice, real justice within the criminal justice system. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, my first thought, JR, is of course the political animal, Phil Murphy, politicized the event immediately by talking more about the Second Amendment and the like. That's not what's going on here. There
Right.
are criminals and criminals in waiting that we have to do a better job of making sure that illegally obtained firearms do not end up in their hands. That's what we need to do better as a state and as a country, because that's what's going on here. And so using it as an attempt to further infringe upon the Second Amendment, which if Phil Murphy could, JR, he'd repeal the Second Amendment. Okay.
No question.
Okay. We're not repealing the Second Amendment. People have a right to bear arms. They have a right to defend themselves. And if people
Right.
wonder why gun permit applications are up 300% across New Jersey and the nation, JR, it has a lot to do with the Democrats' rhetoric with regard to disbanding, defunding, reimagining police. Listen, there's bad CPAs, there's bad doctors, there's bad teachers, there's bad cops, and we need to weed them out. And I will tell you, as governor, we need to find easier ways to get rid of bad teachers and bad cops. But let's be clear. We are not disbanding, we are not defunding, and we are not going to reimagine policing. Are there improvements we can make? You bet there are. I think we need more women as police officers. I think we need more Black and brown people as police officers. I think we need more cultural competency training. Well, let's stop with the attack on the Second Amendment and let's focus our efforts on not letting criminals and would-be criminals obtain firearms illegally as they currently do.
Right. And I think the other thing too, Jack, that we have to keep in mind is that a lot of people blame a lot of the problems with law enforcement on systemic racism, which is a complete myth. The problem is training. These people need to be properly trained. There isn't an inherent hatred for the other color within all human beings, as they say. Yes, we're all depraved and we're all deprived sinners, but it's not systemic racism. That is used as a tool to continue to divide us into sectarian groups that the Democrats are masters of. But really, essentially, what's happening with law enforcement is they just need good and better training.
That's another default response from the other side of the aisle, JR, systemic racism when attacking Republicans on
Yep.
issues such as this one. And I've always thrown it right back at him and saying, if you want to see systemic racism, I'll show you 40 years of failed Democratic policies in places like Newark, where the Black community has been let down, I believe, by our Democratic governors, including Phil Murphy, who has lied to them. He has lied to
And
them.
they've let you know that. The people of Newark have let you know that during this campaign.
They certainly have. They certainly have. So, listen, this leads into the whole debate that's taking place with regard to critical race theory. We are not a racist nation. Now, no nation on earth has been perfect. Okay.
Nope.
And I think it's important to know of your imperfections so you can work toward improvement. But the ideal of America is a perfect ideal. This is the country that everyone wants to come to for opportunity and security. But let us be clear, we are not a racist nation. The critical race theory is entirely based on the theory that white supremacy exists and whites use laws to maintain some type of white supremacy status. Okay, we're not going to be teaching that in our schools under Governor Ciattarelli.
That's good. And Jack, the proponents of the critical race theory and critical social justice, they never mention the fact that we fought a civil war, that many men, 350,000 men gave their lives, and many more wounded and missing, gave their lives for the idea that all men are created equal. And we won a civil war. The Republican Party won a civil war to abolish slavery. No other nation in the world fought a war to end slavery but the United States. And then we have Republican amendments, the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendment. The proponents of critical race theory act as if those actions and the sacrifice made, ultimately culminating in the martyr of our great Abraham Lincoln, they act as if it didn't even occur, Jack.
I agree, JR. I agree. So listen, we've got to continually look to improve because that's what a great nation does. But at the same time, let's have an honest discussion about our history. And that includes even for someone like myself, who's proud of my Italian heritage. You know, we just had another town here in New Jersey remove a Christopher Columbus statue. Okay. The establishment of Christopher Columbus Day in this country in 1892 by President Benjamin Harrison was in response to 11 Italians being lynched in New Orleans in 1891. In 1891. And Christopher Columbus Day was created and celebrated to acknowledge the contribution of Italian Americans. Now, listen, if we want to celebrate indigenous people, I'm all for that. But let's stop erasing history with why there is a Christopher Columbus Day here in the United States. It was because of discrimination and racism and the lynching of Italians in New Orleans in 1891.
Of course, that Italian heritage is intertwined within the very name of our nation, America Vespucci.
There you go.
How can we forget that? Anyway, Jack, one more, right? But one more question. I want to talk about the Abbott for a moment, which is really the impetus behind the property taxes that we pay. And of course, no other piece of legislation has gone to court more regarding educational financing than this Abbott school ruling, which the Supreme Court back in the 70s said they interpreted the fair and equal or fair and equal education opportunities must be granted to everyone to create this formula. And it was very progressively based and based very much on social justice. So what do you think that we can do to lower the property taxes specifically?
JR, we need a new school funding formula. The current formula is nefarious, arbitrary, unfair, and I will go as far as to say unconstitutional, violating the equal benefit clause of our state constitution, which clearly says no community is supposed to suffer at the expense of another. Now, I'm not going to leave any child or community behind. You know me extremely well, and you know that's not my nature. At the same time, we need a flatter and more equitable distribution of state aid for schools. We are not going to be, under Governor Ciattarelli, the state with the highest property taxes in the nation. We're not. We're also not going to be the state that is the worst in which to do business in the nation. We're not. We're going to fix those two things under Governor Ciattarelli. And in so doing, we make New Jersey a more affordable place for young people to get started. We make New Jersey a more affordable place for people that are raising a family. We make New Jersey a more affordable place for people to retire. And we make New Jersey a much more dynamic place to attract capital, start a new business, and create more jobs. That is what the focus of my governorship is all about.
That's right. And Jack, as we wrap it up, tell everyone why they need to vote on the June 8th primary, and they need to check off Jack Ciattarelli. Why are you the man, the only man who can beat Phil Murphy in November?
Well, one of the raps on the Republican Party that the Democrats always try, JR, is that we like low turnouts. We like low turnouts, and we want to disenfranchise people. Nothing could be further from the truth. When Abraham Lincoln was elected in 1860, the turnout was 80%. 80%. Mm-hmm. The second highest in the nation's history. We want people to vote. And the reason why we want Republicans to vote for Jack Ciattarelli on June 8th is because there's only one guy in this race that can beat Phil Murphy in November. Let's not lose sight of the goal. The goal is to win in November. You need a great candidate, a great message, great energy, a great team, and someone that can raise money. Okay? Yes. We're the only people that have maximized the primary spend at $7.5 million. My opponents haven't been able to raise 2 nickels, if you will.
No.
Right? Didn't qualify for state matching funds, both of which tried to. And when one of them failed for Singh, he's trying to make it sound as I would never spend your taxpayer money that way. My goodness, the first account he opened up was her Singh matching funds. Come on, it's just another lie. But the reason they want to vote for Jack Ciattarelli is the goal, JR, the goal is to beat Phil Murphy. And there's only one guy that can do that. And you're looking at him right now.
I believe that. We've believed that for a long time, Jack. And I want to leave us with some inspiring words as we go forth unto the battle, under our primary victory and June 8th, and then on to November. I want to read some inspiring words, Jack, for you. Then I want you to comment, and then we'll end the show. But Abraham Lincoln made mention, and he used the illusion, or not the words, the actual words of the King James translation of Proverbs 25:11. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold and pitchers of silver, to describe the relationship between the principles of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Now, in January of 1861, he said, all this, quote, all this is not the result of an accident. He's talking about the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. It's not an accident. It wasn't a fluke. It was and of course, being the Calvinist that I am and Lincoln was, we believe in the sovereignty of God in all things. But he said, all this is not the result of an accident. It has a philosophical cause, and philosophy means the love of wisdom, if you will. Without the Constitution and the Union, we could not have attained the result, being our independence. But even these are not the primary cause of our prosperity. There is something back of these, entwining itself more closely about the human heart. That something is the principle of liberty to all, the principle that clears the path to all, gives hope to all, and by consequence, enterprise and industry to all. What are your thoughts, Jack, on that?
My thoughts, JR, is that there's something divine about Lincoln with the ability to put the pen to the paper and espouse that kind of wisdom, philosophy, and it compels us to this very, very day. This being an election season, one of my favorite Lincoln quotes is what he once said is, have great faith in the people. Give them the facts. They'll do the right thing every single time.
Yep, that's a great encouragement to the people. And Jack, I want to thank you so much for joining me this morning. Have a great day. I'm sure you're going to be all over the place. We're still hearing that Beach Boys song, I Get Around, in the back of our minds. And we'll be looking forward to implementing Jake's cashmere after the primary victory.
Well, there you go, JR. As you know, when it comes to the two of us, we never run out of conversation. What we always run out of is time. But I am already looking forward to next time. Looking forward to next time. And thank you. Thank you for all that you do on behalf of the Constitutional Republicans, on behalf of our community, on behalf of our state, and for bringing great balance to the public discourse. And I really mean that. We hear a lot of, if I may use the word, crap these days on the airways. But you're someone that has always brought balance because of the angle you come at it from. So thank you.
Well, I greatly appreciate that, Jack. That warms the cockles of my heart, if you will. But I do appreciate you and all you're doing, and stay strong, and keep drinking plenty of fluids because it's warming up out there. But yep, you're in great shape. You're ready for the fight, and we're glad to support you, Jack. And I hope everyone will share the video and talk to your fellow Republican voters, and get them out to support Jack Ciattarelli, because he has, as I've said, my motto was the mind, the heart, and the soul to beat Phil Murphy. And I truly believe that, Jack. God bless.
JR, thank you, buddy. See you soon.
Okay. Have a great day. Thank you all.